are you all ready for some Wheel of Time content? I decided go spoilers for my Wheel of Time book talks. For one, there's 14 of them, so the spoiler-free wouldn't last very long anyways. And there's going to be a series review for spoiler-free, and I feel like a spoiler-free Eye of the World review would just be me talking about the series. And also, so many people have read Wheel of Time, and I'm rereading, so I want to talk about spoilers. This is going to be only Eye of the World spoilers, and then I'll probably have a section at the end where I talk about foreshadowing that I will be timestamped, and I'll give a lot of warning for. But let's get into it. So, right away, you get to start with that prologue, and right away remind me why I love Robert Jordan's writing and the Wheel of Time. Oh, yeah, so I know I said it clearly, but I'm going to start spoiling Eye of the World now. If you haven't read Eye of the World, then get out. If you have read Eye of the World but not future Wheel of Time books, you are still fine. So, we get Wheel of Time, and I remember the first time I read this prologue. For those who don't know, this is a reread. I'm rereading Eye of the World, not reading it for the first time. But yeah, so the first time I read that prologue, I was like, that was cool. I have no idea what just happened. But this time, that was cool, and I know exactly what was happening, and it was amazing, and I see why it is considered one of the best prologues in the genre. We got good old LTT, Luz Theron, and man, is he insane. Oh my god, I know exactly what was actually happening, not just his perception, and love the way it goes between like his thoughts and the third person narrator that is actually describing things somewhat accurately. And then we got the good old betrayer of hope shows up and trolls him by healing him. And so Great's Dragon Mount right next to Tar Valon for everyone can meme on it. Anyway, and then we get into Rand, and Rand is pretty clearly at his least interesting in this book. I think anyone would be, I guess there are books that he isn't in, basically. But for the books he's in, anyone would be hard-pressed to argue that this isn't Rand at his least interesting. That being said, I am not one of the people who call him bland Rand. I like Rand in this book. I don't love Rand, but I like Rand. And the moment I start to like Rand, or started to like Rand the first time through, and this time through, is, it's after Chapter 5. And, you know, he's dragging Tam back, and Tam kind of says, okay, yeah, I'm not your father. Pulls the old reverse Darth Vader out on him. Luke, I'm not your father. And I remember the first time I read it, kind of expecting, like, Rand would be like, all right, I want to go find out who his father is. But no, Rand stands by Tam because he's my boy, and he would not let Tam down like that. And I really like the way that Robert Jordan writes internally conflicted characters. I think it's one of his biggest strengths. I'm finding the end of that chapter. It'll be chapter 5, I think. So the end of chapter 6. And I really like the way that Robert Jordan... whatever. It might not be. I don't know. But Robert Jordan has a lot of characters with a lot of internal conflict. And Rand especially throughout the series, I love. Oh no, wait. The Moraine thing comes after. I was thinking... I should mention Moraine, story time with Moraine, but that actually happens after what I'm talking about. So we got Rand, who says, light, who am I? And is very conflicted about the whole Tam is not my father thing, but also Tam is his father still, even if he's not biologically his father. And he gets back to the Edmund's Field, and it's so funny to read, like, the Wheel of Time characters here. Like, we got Matt, who's just being Matt. Rand, people say Rand feels younger than 20. I do agree. In this book, Rand does not feel like a 20-year-old. He does feel younger than that, especially for the first third of the book. But Nynaeve can't heal Tam, so he makes the decision to go to Moraine. And Moraine is my favorite character in this book. She's not my favorite character in the series, but the first time I read the book, through book 1, Moraine was easily my favorite character, and this time Moraine is my favorite character because why wouldn't she be? She's Moraine. And anyway, like, then you get there's also some Moraine storytelling, and there's so much world building that I was able to catch this time through. Like they one of the stories they reference like the Apollo race to the moon, which obviously I didn't catch first time through, and I feel like I caught so many more subtleties to the world building, especially because people kind of mention like stories and different people all the time. And the start of the IR world, it was so great to actually like know what those things were. On first read, it was like kind of cool, but I really enjoyed that, especially on reread. And pretty quickly after getting back, I'm glad Tam gets to have one conversation with Tam. Rand manages to have one conversation with Tam where he says the truth an Aes Sedai tells you might not be the truth you think you heard. Gee, I wonder if that sentence is going to be relevant for the rest of the series. maybe. It's really relevant for the rest of the series. Because we got the old Aes Sedai can't lie, but they can be creative in how they phrase things, and they can imply things. And play on your assumptions. I love this. I guess it's a trope at this point of people can't lie but still trick people. I've seen it done. The best I've seen it done is Aes Sedai in the Wheel of Time, and with the Winter and Summer Court in Dresden. Both do it fantastically, and we get a start of that. Although Moraine is, for the most part, plays it straightforward with Rand and the boys, but she's one of the more trustworthy Aes Sedai. And anyways, and they are off, and they are going fast, and they are bringing Bella, and Egwene is hopping along with them because she just kind of wants to, which is a much less good reason than everyone else who's like, we're gonna die. And they also got the Gleeman, and it is time for a run, and they get to the ferry, and blah, blah, blah. All that's great. We are going to skip forward quite a bit, because one thing I want to say is when Nynaeve unites with them a little bit more, I really wish I could have seen Nynaeve bullying the people at Terran Ferry. Like, that was something I did not appreciate the first time through. Like, we see Moraine, give them a ton of gold and then sink their barge, and, the Terran Ferry guy's still reluctant to get it going, but Nynaeve just bullied her way on there, which, knowing Nynaeve, yes, that is exactly how that would go down. If she wants on that ferry, it's happening. Probably many braids were probably tugged, and in general, the first time I read Eye of the World, I was annoyed by Nynaeve because I was just annoyed with how she saw Moraine, and I was like, no, Moraine is right, you should listen to her. I trusted Moraine basically right away, and so I was like, stop distrusting Moraine, but I already really like Nynaeve more on the reread, and I'm really looking forward to some of the plots that I wasn't as huge of a fan of because they were very Nynaeve-centered. I end up loving Nynaeve even on first read, but this time I love her right away. And so Nynaeve bullied her way on. Rand did not piss off the White Cloaks because they're just geniuses. And then they continue to be more genius, because really where this book starts to stand apart from Lord of the Rings, because so far we've had a group of people who start in a very isolated part of the world, where then a wise wizard and Aragorn-like person show up, and also some very cloaked, mysterious people attack, and then they run away, and then they cross a ferry, and maybe go to an inn at some point. But where it really starts to go different is Shadar Logoth. And the idea of Shadar Logoth, I think, is really interesting. And it is basically people, in order to fight the Shadow and the Dark One, we're like, yeah, we're going to just be even worse. And it's kind of funny because not the Dark One himself, but throughout the series, almost everyone who follows the Dark One is motivated not by malice, but by selfishness. And I think, in general, in the Wheel of Time, I think Robert Jordan's kind of view of humanity is he didn't think we humans are particularly malicious, but we can be very petty and selfish. And Shadar Logoth is almost like the reason it's even worse is Shadar Logoth is malicious. And the stuff in Mordeith in Shadar Logoth, he isn't just self-interested and he doesn't not care about others. Shadar Logoth seems to be actively malicious, which is very, very rare in the Wheel of Time for things that aren't literally shadow spawn. Obviously, like Mirdrawl and Trollocs also explicitly basically just are malicious and enjoy killing things. But like Dark Friends and Forsaken are almost never motivated by being malicious. It's almost always that they're self-interested and they just don't care what happens to other people, which kind of I think aligns more with what I think about humanity. I know like humanity are never malicious, but I think most of the bad things people do are primarily self-interested. And also Robert Jordan seemed to think that humans are very petty. And I think that's one reason why Wheel of Time can be kind of a hit or miss series, and that's because some people get annoyed by the petty characters. I actually kind of generally find it rings somewhat true. So that's probably one reason why I enjoy the characterization in the Wheel of Time so much, while a lot of people kind of struggle with it. Anyways, so Shadar Logoth happens, and obviously nothing that happens there will have long-term effects in the series. And Matt is an idiot and takes the dagger and is like, he didn't hand it to me, I took it. Anyway, so Matt's map, and this is where the crew kind of splits apart. And the part after is probably my least favorite part of the book. And you've got like Perrin with the traveling people, and kind of Rand and Matt on a boat. And it's not bad, but it's definitely like the part of the book that I think was the least interesting. I really like the start. I love the world. Also, for Robert Jordan's writing, I really like Robert Jordan's prose. A lot of people struggle with how descriptive he is, and I never did struggle with how descriptive he is on the first time through, and I think this time I was trying to figure it out. Why? And I think I did, and it's because when he's describing something, he doesn't just describe the thing, he also says, like, what the character thinks of there, so a lot of the time he kind of layers character work in there. So he's not just, like, describing the city of Camelin. He'll be like, Rand will describe how big Camelin is, and then will think to himself, like, how are we ever going to hide in this city? Instead of just pure descriptions. And I think, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, like, it gives me something to focus on, and also makes it easier to picture the world, because I don't have to focus on not just the exact description. I can just build in my head what would cause that reaction as well. And also it tells me something about the characters. So I actually really like the way Robert Jordan describes things. And I actually really, really enjoy his writing style and his prose. And as I said, I also very much enjoy his internal monologues. I think for his dialogue, he's very good at making people distinctive for his dialogue. I think one thing is, it's not exactly the most natural dialogue always, and I think that's one thing people, especially sometimes with like Nynaeve or Egwene, when Nynaeve is talking, it's Nynaeve, but it's also, I think, very, very few people talk the way like Nynaeve or Egwene does. Now, I also think that could be that we see almost everything in the series from the lens of like people who grew up in Two Rivers. And while there are a lot of cultures in Wheel of Time, Two Rivers is also its own culture. And I think in general for the Wheel of Time, one reason I think the cultures feel so distinctive is that the point of views we get from those cultures are so affected by how they grew up. And I think he does that better than the huge, huge, huge majority of fantasy cultures, where sometimes the non-point of view characters will like act differently and have different values. And then, like, the point of view character will still kind of have different values that we do. But Robert Jordan never does do that. He always, even when it's kind of inconvenient or would be harder to write, he doesn't kind of take the shortcut and just give the main characters our values. And Two Rivers, while it's not like as distinctive as like the Aiel or something, it definitely does have its own set of values, and also, growing up in a world that has been a matriarchy for the last, 4,000 years, and, men who can channel are basically the equivalent of, like, like the scariest thing someone can be. I think it's hard to put yourself in the frame of mind of someone that lives in a world where in the past, male channers literally brought the population down from billions to millions. Like, that's a ridiculous cataclysm that we haven't had anything like in human memory. And yeah, it's been 4,000 years, but also those things that caused it 4,000 years ago still pop up all over the place and remind you how terrifying they are every few years. And I think that's one thing. People get annoyed with some characters and how they respond to Rand being able to channel. And I actually think the way they respond is how they would respond if they when growing up in that world, like growing up in Two Rivers or Canelan or anywhere there. It's not how we would respond if you plunk us into Randland, because we didn't grow up in Randland and don't have the same history. I'm sidetracking a lot. This is my first spoiler review, so I have to work the kinks out. But anyways, and then it does move on. We get Tom, which has mysterious light flashing that I'm still not sure what causes it. I don't know if it's like Tom hitting two power forged daggers together, or someone channeling, or anything, or just Tahaveran nonsense. I still don't know. Like when Tom charges the mirror draw and tells Rand and Mat to run, there's like a light that flashes, and I have no idea what caused it. But anyways, then we have Rand and Mat on the run on their own, and I love this section of the book. I think one of my favorite parts of this book is when Rand gets channeling sickness. Both the first time I read it, going, oh shit, Rand can channel and has channeling sickness, because Moraine describes the symptoms to Nynaeve's earlier. One thing I caught this time that I didn't notice last time is Rand has channeling sickness in Baerlon. The first time I didn't notice that. I think I just assumed his reaction was the reaction to like a big city. But he does have channeling sickness in Baerlon. That's just before we know the symptoms, and not as extreme as he does later. And I love, even like dagger possessed and crazy, Mat still takes care of Rand. And there was one moment that I feel like we missed some Mat shenanigans, and it's when they're going to perform and there's not a skinny innkeeper, who are obviously terrifying, but then Rand starts like shaking, and so they can't. And we're from Rand's perspective, and Mat just kind of brushes off how he convinced the innkeeper to like let them sleep in the stable in the horse loft. But I feel like there were some real Mat shenanigans there, because I feel like it was this is the type of thing that Mat would underplay. So I really want to know what happened there from Mat's perspective, because I think we definitely missed some top tier Mat shenanigans. And I'm a big fan of those Mat shenanigans. And then we get into Camelin, and we meet Loyal, who's the best. Anyone who doesn't like Loyal, why? He's fantastic. Rand thinks he's a Trolloc. Mat's going crazy. Meanwhile, Perrin's got his wolf thing going on. And I gotta say, so Robert Jordan, I think, is pretty good at, like, tension. The scene where they're, like, sneaking through the woods, and they see, like, the ravens descend on a fox and, like, swarm it and pick it apart and kill it. Like, that's pretty terrifying. Like, just like if ravens see you. And that scene I thought was really good. And then they get captured by the White Cloaks, which sucks. And meanwhile, we got Nynaeve and Moraine. And I know on first read, I was one of the people, I mean everyone, like on first read, the Nynaeve Lan romance comes completely out of left field. Like later in the book, you're just like, wait, what? When the hell did that happen? This time I was like, oh, okay. That's when that happened. It was pretty obvious on reread. I was like, how did I miss this? Like, I still know that, and because everyone else doesn't see it coming, and I didn't see it coming. Like, I know on first read it's not obvious, but holy crap, rereading it, it was obvious that there was like a romance going on there. I still don't think this is going to happen with other romances. I seriously doubt that future romance, all of them will make sense. But this one, I was just like, huh, well, that was pretty obvious. I don't know how I didn't see that coming. And we got Nynaeve with Moraine, and Nynaeve kind of criticizing Moraine, and Moraine explains why she's doing what she is, and it always makes sense because she's the best. And so yeah, they rescue Egwene and Perrin. Nynaeve steals Bella back, and they are on their way. and they get Rand and Loyal starts saying ta'veren a lot. And so I start saying ta'veren because I'm reading the book. And we are off to the Eye of the World. And I actually, at the Eye of the World, I guess I should say I love Faldara. Faldara is great. But we're moving on to the Eye of the World. And I actually kind of knew what was going on here at the Eye of the World, which was very nice. I was like, oh, yeah, he's channeling here, and okay, that makes sense. And he's using the Untainted Sayadine in the Eye of the World. And it was still pretty epic. It's not like my favorite. It's one of the weaker endings to a Wheel of Time book, if we're being honest. Like, it's not bad. Wheel of Time has pretty great endings in general. But I think as the endings go in Wheel of Time, it's weaker. In general, my biggest problem with this book is just everyone is a less interesting version of their future self. Where, like, it kind of has, like, the cozy classical fantasy feel, but it's just, like, Rand isn't as interesting, Perrin isn't as interesting. Well, Perrin's more interesting than he is in some books. But, like, just everyone is less interesting than their future self. So I do like this. I give Eye of the World 8.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed reading it. It reminded me why I love RJ's writing. It reminded me why I love RJ's characters. It reminded me why I love RJ's world building. It reminded me that RJ has some pacing issues sometimes, but I really am excited to get more into the later versions of the same characters, because I think most of RJ's like great character work comes more from how people develop over time than who they start as. Yeah, I need to work on my spoiler reviewing. Let me know how this was in the comments. I'm reading The Great Hunt right now. I'm only like 20 pages in, but it's great. And more Wheel of Time stuff will be coming in the future. Oh, also, I wanted to read a section of... No, never mind. That's spoilers for everything. Okay, before we go, spoilers for everything. My favorite bit of foreshadowing in this book, of which there's a ridiculous amount of, is... so, if you have not read all of the Wheel of Time, leave now. This is literally epilogue, like foreshadowing for the epilogue of A Memory of Light. So, spoilers for the like epilogue of book 14. Yeah, and one of Rand's dreams with Bahal, with Ishi, he says like, and I saw a face in my mirror, my face, Bahal Zamon's face, like one face. And I was just like, bruh, I'm gonna actually find the exact quote. We're doing this live. I'm gonna edit out the searching part of this probably. There was only one face in those endless mirrors. His own face. Bahal Zamon's face. One face. Bruh. That's all I have to say about that. Bruh. Like, you're just putting that in plain sight. Anyway, so that was my favorite bit of foreshadowing in this book. Obviously, there's an insane amount. A lot of the foreshadowing, though, was just kind of people saying something. And then I'm like, oh, that's going to happen. This was actually like a prophecy type thing where you would expect it to predict the future. Then there's obviously Min's viewings as well. But this was my favorite bit of foreshadowing. Anyways, that's it for Eye of the World. Bye, everyone.